Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. My name is Ashly Barta, and I am the Special Education Program Director here at the Military Homeschoolers Association. I'm also a homeschool military mom and a special education consultant. I'm super passionate about helping families and supporting their differently abled kiddos through their learning journey. Tonight's webinar is one that I've been super excited to do tonight. It's called When Learning is Hard, What's Happening in the Brain and How We Can Help. We're going to dive in really quick after we introduce my wonderful co-hosts, Dr. Amy Moore and Sandy Zamalis from Learning RX. And I'm just going to let you two ladies take it from here and introduce yourselves. And we've done this a few times, so I feel like you're introducing yourselves one more time, but I'll just hand it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Ashly. We're super excited to be back again for the third time with you in a month. It's been really fun getting to spend time with you all, and I love your mission. As we've talked about before, Sandy and I both have military backgrounds as well, and so it's near and dear to our hearts for sure. So if you would just pop up our presentation, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do about a 20-minute presentation, and then we're going to spend the whole rest of the time answering questions live. Sandy and I love to troubleshoot and problem solve in real time, and so we want to leave enough room for that part of what we're going to do in the end. And so I am going to go a little quickly through the slides just to give you all a little bit of a background of who we are, what we do, and help give you a little bit of insight into what's happening in the brain during those learning struggles. And then we'll just dive into whatever questions your audience has. Sound good, Ashly?
Yes, sounds great.
Right.
And just remember, if you have questions, just put them down in the chat and we can answer them when you guys are ready.
All right, fantastic. Thanks. All right, so our presentation tonight is called Why is Learning So Hard? Understanding the Brain's Role in Your Homeschool Classroom. I am Dr. Amy Moore here with my favorite colleague, Sandy Zamalis. Let me tell you just a little bit about ourselves. So I'm a cognitive psychologist. I'm the Director of Psychology and Research at Learning RX World Headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm the host of the Brainy Moms podcast. Before I was a psychologist, I was a teacher, a curriculum specialist, a teacher educator. I have done some homeschooling as well. I have a master's in early childhood, a PhD in psych. I'm a board certified Christian counselor, and I'm an ADHD mom and a mom with ADHD. So I get the struggle from both sides. And then Sandy is a board certified cognitive specialist. She's the executive director and owner of Learning RX Stanton Harrisonburg in Virginia. She is my co-host on the Brainy Moms podcast. And Sandy has 2 adult children who she homeschooled the whole way through. So we cannot wait just to share some stuff with you tonight about what we do, and hopefully it'll help you. So one of the top concerns that we hear after working with over 130,000 children and adults at Learning RX is my kid can't focus. It is the number one concern that we hear. I'm sure that many of you tonight can relate. And then the second most common concern we hear from parents is my kid can't read. So not only is focus a concern, but also reading, especially fluent reading and reading comprehension. So let's address focus first, and then we'll talk about reading. So the reality of focus is this: most kids can focus, but their focus might not be on the most relevant piece of information at the time. So they can focus or direct their mental effort, but it's not always on the right thing or what we want them to be focusing on. So what we know about the brain is that it actually shifts focus 4 times per second. And it shifts from this sharp focus on the task to this broader awareness of what's going on in our surroundings and then back to the task. And we could argue that our brains are created that way to maximize our survival, right? Like we have to know if there's danger, like a tiger in the bush behind us. So we focus on the task, but continually scan our environment for anything more important than that task. But there are some other influences on that shift in focus as well. So let's look at some common reasons why our kids and ourselves direct mental effort to anything besides the task. All right, number one reasons are we're tired, hungry, sick, or stressed. Any one of those would shift our focus from a task that we're working on. And I'm going to come back to stress in just a minute. But some other reasons why we lose focus when we're working on tasks might be because we're bored, we're not motivated, we're suffering anxiety over something, or we're exhibiting some sort of defiant behavior, meaning I don't want to work on this task, therefore I'm going to do something else. But defiance is rarely the case. It just looks that way. So a big cause of off-task focus could be that the task is too hard or our skills aren't strong enough for the task. And that combination causes stress and frustration, which impacts our ability to think and learn. So it's really important to know that distraction isn't always about focus. It's about frustration. So when something is too hard, our child will begin to feel some frustration. And if he can't push through the frustration because he doesn't have the skills for the task, then we're going to see one of 3 things happen. 1, he chooses to focus or do something else or think about something else. 2, he has a stress-induced fight or flight reaction or a meltdown. Or 3, he freezes and can't do anything. So that's why I always say in response to parent concerns about focus is that it's so much more than that. What looks like a focus problem might actually be a memory problem or a processing speed problem. So we need to get really specific about what the struggle is so we can target the struggle. So we need to move the focus beyond focus and attention when it comes to learning struggles. So I mentioned processing speed and memory a second ago. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What are cognitive skills? That's the work that we do and the space that we're in as a cognitive psychologist and a board certified cognitive specialist. So let's talk about that. Let's take a big picture look. So the first thing to understand is that there are 2 parts to SMART. There's information storage, that's knowledge and accumulated facts, things like spelling and science and history and math. That's our database of information, and we measure things. We measure those things with grades or achievement tests. But then in the purple piece of the puzzle, there's information processing, or how efficiently we can take in and use information using skills like attention and reasoning and visualization and memory and auditory processing. So I want to do a demonstration to show you what it looks like to use those skills, how our brain uses those skills to complete a task. So you can leave your mics off, but I'd love for you guys to all do this demonstration with me. So in just a second, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to complete a task with only your mind. Don't use any paper. So I want you to say it out loud. All right, ready? You have 10 seconds to spell the last name of the first U.S. president backwards. Ready? Go. And stop. All right, how'd you do? This is what it looks like. So the first U.S. president is, of course, Washington. And so this is what Washington looks like spelled backwards. So I want to walk you through what your brain did during that task. This is called the learning model, and it represents that information processing and storage that we just talked about. It's the process of taking information in interpreting it, acting on it, or banking it away. And so these are the core skills that our brain uses in that process all day, every day. And here's how you use them in completing that 10-second task. So first, you had to remember the name of the first US president. That's long-term memory. Next, you had to plan a strategy for how you were going to complete that task. Well, that's reasoning. You probably projected an image of the word Washington in your mind or in the air, right? Well, that's visual processing or visualization. And then you had to manipulate the sounds and the letters that make up the word Washington and put them in the correct order. That's auditory or language processing. And your brain was keeping track of which letters you had already used and which ones were coming up. So that's working memory. About halfway through this task, you may have gotten frustrated. So you have to engage your attention skills. And finally, I only gave you 10 seconds to do the task. So you had to work quickly. That's processing speed. So in that one seemingly simple task, you engaged at least 7 different cognitive skills all at the same time. And that illustrates how cognition or thinking is complex. So imagine if you had a weakness in one of those skills. Could you have done that task? Probably, unless it was long-term memory. And you have to have actually been able to remember that Washington was the first president, or you couldn't have done the task at all. But what if you had a weakness in 2 or 3 of those skills? What if your long-term memory and your working memory and your processing speed were weak, or just not strong enough? That task might have been impossible for you. So I want to show you how we use those skills in everyday teaching and learning. So notice that learning to read, reading comprehension, writing, and math ability all require the skills of reasoning, visual processing, auditory processing, long-term memory, working memory, processing speed, and attention. So your kids are using these skills all day, every day in all of their lessons. So now that we've talked about what cognitive skills are in general, I want to show you what we see in terms of the pattern of weaker cognitive skills in students who have actual attention struggles or a formal diagnosis of ADHD, for example. So in 2019, neuroscientist Dr. Christina Ledbetter and I created cognitive profiles of more than 5,000 people with ADHD from ages 4 through 40. We used standardized IQ tests, and what we did is we plotted the performance of each of those subtests across ages. And what we found was really surprising. What we found in those 5,000 people was that attention was not the weakest skill in ADHD. In fact, working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed were weaker skills than attention across age groups. And so that prevailing wisdom behind most ADHD interventions is that attention skills need to be strengthened. But this study showed us that if an intervention is only targeting attention, it's going to miss the boat on what's really happening in ADHD and attention issues. So a couple years later, we looked at over 8,000 kids and adults with ADHD, and we did the same thing. We plotted their cognitive profiles, and we saw the exact same thing, that working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed all fell below the 38th percentile, telling us again, hey, we're missing something when we think that ADHD is just about focus. All right, so when a parent is concerned and says to me, my kid can't focus, what that probably means is something like this instead. My kid is struggling with something so much that he can't do it in a reasonable amount of time or at all. So instead of sticking with it, he finds something else to do or think about doing. See, his brain is shifting off task because there might be a struggle in one or more of those cognitive skills. And we have this tendency to use the word focus when we mean stick-to-itness or perseverance on a task. And the reality is, if a task is too hard or too demanding, we aren't going to stick to it. That doesn't mean we can't focus at all. It just means we won't focus on that or for very long on that. So I want to shift to the other concern that we hear all the time from parents, and that's when a parent says, my kid can't read. And when they say my kid can't read, And then they tell me that they've changed their curriculum multiple times. They've tried every structured literacy approach out there. Again and again, a red flag will pop up for me. And so here's why. Here's a slide from research that we conducted on more than 4,000 children with reading struggles. And what we found was the exact same pattern in children with dyslexia and reading disability that we found in those kids and adults with ADHD, that working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed were all weak. And in the absence of an effective intervention, that yellow arrow going down is showing that those skills across ages continue to get worse. This is another way to visualize that same information so that you can see working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed all fell below the 38th percentile in these 4,000 plus kids with reading disabilities. All right. Why are cognitive skills so important for reading? I just want to talk about 3 of them really quick. So here's why working memory is important for reading. We need strong working memory to hold letter and sound information in our minds. It helps us to integrate ideas and track information in the text and coordinate decoding with meaning. All right, why is processing speed so critical for reading? Well, we need strong processing speed to be able to quickly recognize words, to quickly retrieve phonological information, to keep up with the main ideas in the text, and to efficiently map new words. And why is long-term memory so important for reading? Well, we need to be able to recognize words without having to decode them every single time. And so with strong working memory, that's how we do that. And then that helps us retrieve prior knowledge. We know that prior knowledge is critical for reading comprehension. And then a strong long-term memory helps us store vocabulary and concepts. So we see these reading pyramids all over the internet and in all of the teacher manuals of all of the reading curriculum that you've probably picked up, especially if it's a structured literacy approach like an Orton Gillingham-based program. But the bottom of that pyramid is different. So in our work, we believe that strong cognitive skills are the foundation needed to support the development of all of those other reading components, of the development of phonological awareness and phonemic awareness and phonics and decoding and fluency and comprehension and vocabulary. Most reading programs don't address cognitive skills, and we just talked about how critical those are to learning and reading. So what do we do about it? How do we help improve these cognitive skills? Well, cognitive skills can't be taught like US history can be taught. They actually have to be trained, kind of like we train someone how to play tennis. So every child can benefit from hands-on games. I'm sure you guys have a closet full of board games because games engage multiple cognitive skills. We are going to actually give you a QR code in just a couple of minutes. You scan that code and give us a little tiny bit of your information so that we can send you an entire list of games and the individual cognitive skills that those games help develop. We'll give you a bunch of other free stuff too. But although games can engage cognitive skills, they can't remediate cognitive skills. So struggling learners may need a formal intervention, and that starts with a cognitive skills assessment and then cognitive skills training, where we use activities that actually strengthen those weak areas. So what is cognitive training, you ask? So cognitive training is targeted, repeated, intense mental tasks based on the concept of neuroplasticity, or the brain's amazing ability to change with experience. And we do that through one-on-one human delivery, either across the table from each of our students, or we come in to your dining room table through Zoom. We are super supportive of our homeschool community, and so that works out really, really well so that you can stay focused on what's happening in your homeschool environment, and we just come in and do that targeted intervention. So we use over 1,000 different hands-on training procedures that help us train weak cognitive skills. And the reason that we know what cognitive exercises to use is because we do a complete assessment and we find out what those cognitive profiles are. And then some kids are going to need some reading and math remediation. So we're not just cognitive skills experts, we also are reading experts as well. What sets us apart is that we do have published peer-reviewed research that shows significant changes in all of those cognitive skills in real life. And we use MRI in our research to show changes in the brain too. So quickly, this is our expertise. We've been training neurodivergent brains for 30 plus years. We've trained over 130,000 kids and adults in 45 countries. I work for the headquarters where we have a team of PhD level psychologists, neuroscientists, audiologists, and education specialists who oversee this global outreach. And we have that peer-reviewed research. So you can find more about actual cognitive skills training at learningarts.com. We'd love it if you would find our podcast at thebradymoms.com. And now I'm going to give you your QR code for free stuff. Part of the email that you'll get, you'll get the spreadsheet with the games. You'll get some free cognitive training exercises that you can try at home. You'll get a link to these slides and a link to my full ADHD presentation. It's about an hour long, so you can really dig in on some of that. And then we'll sort of nurture that relationship with you and help you find the resources that you need for your kids. All right, here's your QR code.
Oh, that's a good one. Definitely get it.
So I'll just leave that up for a couple of seconds, get your questions ready, and then we'll stop sharing our screen so that we can just have a conversation. All right,
that was amazing.
Amy, I think that's the fastest I've seen you do that one.
Let's see, 22 minutes, less than 22 minutes. That's pretty good, right? And I didn't talk double time, just maybe time and a half.
Oh, I actually have taken the brain training with Dargan at one of your centers. So just seeing those screens up there, I listened to the metronome in my head.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see some brain training demonstrations about like how we work with kids and adults, what it looks like in person, what it looks like over Zoom, and you will hear that metronome clicking. We pace every task with a metronome to increase the intensity. That's what drives neuroplasticity. That's what drives the changes in the brain. And so some people are taken aback by checking metronome at the beginning, but I guarantee you it works.
Yeah, it's really the secret sauce to what we do because of that divided attention.
Yeah.
There's so many other interventions that can be helpful. And this one really kind of, I would say, amplify like times 10 when you add that metronome in, because you're adding that divided attention piece, and that intensity is really what drives blood flow and oxygen to the parts of the brain we need it to. So
yeah.
And it was at the beginning. Oh no, go ahead.
Well, no, I just
going to give my personal experience
because I am, like big on legalities here. We have not actually put a metronome inside of an MRI machine because it's metal and that would be dangerous. So I don't have brain imaging of the exact mechanism of what is happening in the brain while that metronome is ticking. But that is our hypothesis as to what is happening in the brain during the metronome.
I loved it as a past public school teacher and as an educator at home. At first, I thought, oh my goodness, what is this going to do? Because I feel really old. My brain doesn't feel as elastic as it should. I am failing. And then by the end, I was clapping and I was spelling and I was doing it. And it's almost like a mnemonic device when you're putting something for a younger child to song, in your head. It's great. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I got to experience that. So
that's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Oh, we have some questions. Rita says, how do you chunk material effectively? Do you put hard subjects on differing days, like every other day, or do you just allow each subject less time, but do them all each day?
So can you clarify, are you talking about with cognitive training, or are you asking for advice on chunking?
Oh, let's see.
So my guess is you're asking for advice on chunking since
advice. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sandy, do you want to take that one?
So chunking material is super effective. The brain learns best when you do things in smaller bits than if you were to overtax it with a long, drawn out fight to get through the material. So there is some research that shows that, chunking it, so giving some breaks as you take on the elephant and smaller tasks would certainly be more effective. I don't know the research on doing hard subjects on different days, so maybe Amy would want to chime in on that one. But I think in general, things that are hard in general need more repetition. So you need to, in my mind, from my experience, do them every day so that repetition can help build long-term memory and help pull all of those content pieces together.
Yeah. So repeated exposure is super important. And when we take breaks from the hard stuff, it makes it harder to re-engage. So my advice is always to look at this from a behavioral perspective as well, right? You don't want to decrease motivation by pushing all of the hard stuff and not breaking it up with tasks where your child can experience some success. But you do want to provide that challenge frequently. And so otherwise it becomes this thing that's sitting out there waiting to be done, right? Oh, I'm going to have to do calculus tomorrow. I'm so anxious about doing calculus tomorrow. I wish I never had to do calculus, but I have to do calculus tomorrow, right? Whereas, okay, from 8 to 8:30 every day, that's calculus time. So let's review some of the calculus concepts that you've already mastered that we know that you can do and experience some success on. And then let's start spiral. Let's start a spiral so that we can add a new concept to a known concept. But continue to repeat concepts where your child can experience success, because that drives motivation and resilience. How long does it take doing this technique before you start seeing improvements with your child? Doing which technique? The cognitive training or chunking?
I'm going to say she's thinking the cognitive training.
Yeah, so the minimum we do is about 12 weeks worth of training, and those sometimes 24 weeks, depending on if they need remediation in math and reading. And Sandy can speak more to this as well. But the first half of that program, you don't see a lot budge, right? Because we are paving the way. And then something beautiful happens in the trajectory of change halfway through, where all of a sudden you see these skills awaken learning opportunities where you had not seen them before. Sandy, but you're in the trenches all day, every day with this. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I typically tell parents it takes about 6 weeks to start to notice very small, subtle changes. So it's never anything big or miraculous. It's always slow progress that you see along the way. And typically you start to see, or at least, in my experience, we start to see slightly less frustration. Being able to engage in tasks that normally would trigger a fight, flight, freeze response. Those kinds of things start to show up. Things like reading take longer because there's more scaffolding and more things we need to build along the way. But certainly attention wise, I see more changes on those in very subtle ways earlier on. And that's the really cool part about training, is that they get into a snowball of I can. That's the kind of the sweet design of what we do, because we start at the very beginning for all of our students, whether you're 5 or 95, and we're going to work you through our process, slowly building your resilience and your ability to tackle hard things by letting you have lots of success along the way, so that hard is an incremental hard. A lot of times as a parent, I was a homeschooling parent, so I did this to my children. A lot of times as a homeschooling parent, we can stumble into rigorous and not realize that we've left our kids in a really deep canyon. And they don't have the skill that they need in order to handle this beautiful, amazing curriculum we've chosen to help them be the best possible humans they can be. And so when we don't see that happen, right, and we're not sure how all of a sudden we got in that canyon, having these skills develop along the way, we can rebuild some of that confidence and self-esteem that we accidentally may have tripped when we try to engage our student in a curriculum or something where all of a sudden where their skills were didn't meet the expectation of where that curriculum was. So it's that snowball of success that we're creating along the way, and that's really the magic. And yeah, about 6 weeks to start seeing some really subtle changes, but it does take time. And there you've got to be patient. Because we're making new connections in the brain. So it's not a quick, easy fix. It takes a lot of sustained effort on the student's part, but their confidence is what really shines through. And it's the number one thing that parents tell us at the end of their program. It's just how much more their child believes in themselves.
Yep. All right. So Rita is asking, do you work with adults and children with a history of concussions? Absolutely. We have some great research on traumatic brain injury and repetitive concussions. Absolutely, for sure. It's the same idea. Typically, those connections were already formed and they were just disrupted by injury. And so we're just finding new connections or rerouting those connections, right? But
I was going to say my favorite client. Yeah, my favorite client right now is in his 70s, and he's recovering from a brain bleed. He's been with us for about a year and doing awesome.
So do you do the same games?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter your age. Okay, so I'm so sorry. I did not realize we were popping the questions up right there in the screen. I was reading the chat and probably jumping ahead. So I'm a podcaster. I'm used to being in charge.
No, I think it's great. No, I think you were actually right on. What you were reading was on the screen.
Oh, okay, great. Great, good to know.
So Linda, on top of what you guys were already just discussing, asks, pattern in a child's learning that parents should be on the lookout for what might be a sign that they should seek some help for their cognitive needs. Maybe areas that they may notice that their child is struggling. What could maybe be some red flags?
Yeah. Go, Sandy.
There's a lot. First and foremost, if they aren't meeting those early reading signs, a lot of times in homeschool land, there's advice to just wait and see, and that it'll click at some point. But I think Dr. Amy and I would both urge you that when you start to see struggles, especially on the reading front, the earlier that you can seek intervention, the better, because we've got to catch those things as quickly as we can, especially get to the root of what the problem is as quickly as we can, because that's going to help you dictate what avenue to go down to get them the help that they need. Two, signs of frustration in your child are going to be a big red flag. If you're having to redirect them all the time to be able to handle tasks that you feel, especially if you're comparing to other siblings or to friends with kids around the same age, if it's taking you double the amount of effort to redirect and keep them on task, it's time to just maybe do a check-in and see where those cognitive skills are, because behavior is communication, and your child is communicating with you that there's a problem. They might not be able to tell you what it is or why they're frustrated, but having that kind of assessment gives you an idea if there's, at least at a cognitive level, something going on. And sometimes it could be a developmental issue. It could. We have a very sweet friend who just told me she had some mom guilt recently because she took her son to the doctor and found out that he actually really needed glasses. Right. So, but for whatever reason, when they went to get their eyes checked about 6 months ago, he was having some behavior, and so it didn't go well. But now he's in like a co-op and things aren't going as smoothly, and so that red flag came up. So pay attention to those kinds of things. Behavior is definitely a key indicator that there's a problem, and that you might want to dig a little deeper. Amy, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so we need strong working memory and processing speed to regulate our emotions. And so that is a red flag to me when I see a lot of emotion dysregulation while trying to do schoolwork. And so that says to me something is happening that is creating frustration, right? We talked about that in the slides a few minutes ago, that if there's a weak skill that's creating this frustration and this inability to do the task, then you will see freeze behavior, meltdown behavior, or just deciding to do something completely different. The reason those meltdowns happen is because when I am getting upset or frustrated, I need to be able to think through all the possible reasons that's happening and all the possible alternatives for how I should respond. That takes really strong working memory to hold all of those alternatives or reasons in mind. And I need processing speed because I have to be able to think of those alternatives and those reasons quickly enough to be able to act on it. So if I have a processing speed deficit, then I just can't think, well, what are my alternatives? I could ask mom for help. I could look it up on the internet. I could ask my big brother for help, right? These are all alternatives rather than having a meltdown. So I have to have strong processing speed in order to think of those quickly enough and to keep all of those options in mind to be able to weigh them. That's why we see meltdowns associated with weak cognitive skills. So what looks like a behavior problem is just the manifestation of a cognitive problem.
I would add, I think later on, sometimes kids can mask really well. And then you get to a point where you're noticing that they're still not able to do things independently, like you think would be an age appropriate level for them. That would be a red flag to look for. So for example, it comes out in math a lot. If you're consistently having to work through problems and they just can't seem to work through those things on their own independently, they're not making those good connections and pattern recognition pieces that you need for good math skills, especially as they get into more complex math tasks, like division is usually a good wheels come off the bus situation, word problems, those kinds of things. So be on the lookout for those as well. Your child should be doing more and more independent work the older that they get. And if you're still having to come alongside them, then it's maybe time to figure out if they need some extra support so that they can start to internally really pursue some of those executive functioning tasks on their own.
Yeah. It's usually not the computing of the math.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually the all of the things combined is what I like to tell people, because it's and you are right. Long division really does send out those red flags because it's all of the things together.
Yeah, it's those multi-step tasks. When you start getting into multi-step tasks and their attention skills, their divided attention skills and working memory skills are too weak, like the wheels come off the bus. You've got to be able to help build those skills so that they can do those with ease. because that will definitely cause tears, frustration, shut down when you get into
Yes,
them.
exactly. I think we have one more question. If not, I think it's one more. What do we do for a fatigued learner?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in two ways, and then Sandy can jump in. It's hard to know what you mean by fatigued. If you mean actual fatigue, or do you mean blocked because they're frustrated, right? So let me just answer it both ways. If it looks like your child is fatigued, tired, brain fog, then I would look at diet. I would look at how much physical activity and outdoor time they're getting and quality sleep. Watch my ADHD presentation. It's about an hour long where I really dig deep on some of those things. But sugar causes inflammation in the body. And if the body is inflamed, so is the brain. And that can create brain fog, which looks like fatigue. If there is an undiagnosed milk allergy or milk sensitivity, the antibodies to the casein protein in milk actually poke holes in the myelin sheath. That's the coating around our nerves, so that it keeps our neurons from being able to communicate effectively with each other, right? So food is medicine, and food allergies can cause brain fog, fatigue-like symptoms that will show up in the learning environment. So that's super important. If your child has sensory processing issues, then that can impact how quickly they're falling asleep, and if they're staying asleep, and if they're getting restorative sleep, which can contribute to fatigue the next day. And then that outdoor time is critical. We know that feet in the grass helps with learning, but even just 15 to 20 minutes of aerobic activity increases BDNF. It's called brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's like miracle grow for the brain. It helps create new neurons and neuronal connections. And so we need aerobic activity in order to wake up our brains and help them function. So if you are referring to fatigue in terms of that's my quick answer. Of three things to really look at. So diet, nutrition, physical activity, and sleep. And then if you're saying, is my child tired of doing this? Or do they look like their face is against a brick wall, right? Like, I just can't do it. Then take a break and do something novel. Sometimes the novelty, honestly, of just going to the bathroom and back can reset the brain. And so build those breaks in. So we know some kids who are just determined to push through. I'm going to get this done. I don't want to take a break. Make that something that you value in your homeschool environment. Build those breaks into the schedule. And then I like to create invitations, right? Hey, I'm noticing that this isn't going as quickly as you probably want it to. Why don't we do this for a few minutes and come back to it? Sometimes that can make that's the biggest relief you can give a kid, right? They don't have to be scared to ask for a break, right? You're creating that invitation, and then just do something novel.
Yeah, I would add to what Amy just said, the concept of burnout. If the question was really about like burnout of learning, especially for maybe an older child, I would go back to kind of what I said a little bit ago about that rigor and skill, and really look at your child's curriculum goals and figure out if there's just too much hard and not enough, I would say, Dr. Amy would say, islands of competence in the mix. Kids need a really good balance of things that challenge them, but also things that they're passionate about in order to really balance out that learning process. Because when you say a fatigued learner, what I hear is someone who has just been in the gauntlet and
Done.
is just tired of failing.
Done.
So they need to have some success somewhere. So helping them find that by letting them have activities or subjects that they can be passionate about can really be helpful in that process for you as a parent. You want to give them that break of, hey, we're going to do math for this short amount of time, but then we're going to do, the really cool horse study that we have planned so that they can really dig into the things that they love.
Yeah.
That's a great way to explain that.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the last question. This one for sure. I was joking the last time. We're a military family, Linda says, and are your services covered by TRICARE or other insurances?
Yeah, so most interventions for learning struggles and learning disabilities are not covered by insurance, and so our centers are cash pay. They're about the same rate as occupational therapy, speech therapy, chiropractic care. So no, we have a few neuropsychologists who offer the program as part of their practices. But we have very few left. We used to have a lot because this program used to only be clinical, and then we opened up learning centers. We have just a few clinical programs left.
Okay. Well, thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you, ladies, for coming on again this evening and just visiting a little bit about what Learning RX is and just kind of giving us a little insight on the brain and all of the cool things. I can't wait to re-listen to the podcast you did on ADHD. I just want to thank you guys again. If you're not watching this live and you're catching it later, hashtag replay to make sure that we get you. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me and I can forward them on to Dr. Amy and Sandy, or I think that you guys can be emailed directly as well. So I just want to thanks again
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
I feel like this is almost like it's a weird breakup because we've done this 3 times. So maybe we will do this more often.
Yeah, I will add, if there's any TikTokers out there, I am on TikTok. You can find me at the Brain Trainer Lady, and you can also find the Brainy Mom podcast on TikTok as well. But I know Amy's got her QR code that you guys will have access to those links as well.
Yeah, and you can find us on Instagram at the Brainy Moms.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again, and happy Thursday.
Right.
Thanks, Ashly.
Thanks, Ashly.
Bye.